كتاب الله لا شيء سوى يهذبنا نعمل به كتاب الله لا شيء سوى يهذبنا هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا رسول الله معلمنا.
A couple more examples of things I guess I can give you, but I hope you see that it's not a matter of you have to know a lot of things to reply to people. You just have to be thinking clearly. You don't lose arguments because of something you didn't know. Somebody tells you something you didn't know, now you know it. If you're clear-headed, you give it back to him. It's his problem, not yours. You had the truth to start with. A frequent comment made is people will say, well, you reject what you don't understand. That's how you do business. You don't believe God is a Trinity because you don't understand Trinity. That's why you reject it. To which I ask them, how does Trinity work? Can you explain it to me? And they'll reply, well, no one understands it. So their problem is they're insisting that I've rejected something that I don't understand, and their complaint is, you see, if you just hear more about it, everything will be different. You've heard something and you don't like it. But when you push on this matter to say, well, then you explain it to me, they'll tell you, well, no one can understand it. So what he thought was my problem is his problem too. Nobody understands it, by definition. But in fact, the Muslim doesn't reject things he doesn't understand. He rejects things that there's no indication of. There's a lot of things we don't understand, but we know they're true because we have indications of them. We can see these things. We don't know how atoms work and combine, but we know that they combine. You put a hydrogen and oxygen together, you get water. I've seen it happen. I don't know how it works. I don't reject it because I don't understand it. I can see it. People will try to parallel that, as a man said to me in Australia. He says, you can't explain God, so why should you expect to explain the Trinity? Well, it's different. God I can verify. Lots of indications. Trinity, I've never seen anything that told me there was such a thing. It's not a fair comparison. I've only done it once, but by way of it just occurred to me one time to do it. It was at Texas A&M University last year. We started the talk at 8 o'clock. When I started just as I started to speak, it occurred to me, so I said it. I said, we advertised the lecture at 8, questions at 9. There are people who won't come here till 9 o'clock. Because they don't think I have the answers to these questions. I gave the questions and gave the answers. So they'll be here at 9 to ask those questions. Because they don't think I have the answers, they won't bother coming until question period time. Came 9 o'clock, and sure enough, the first man stepped up to the microphone. He said, I'm sorry I couldn't be here at 8 o'clock, but I wonder, could you have answered this question? It was question number 1. Referred to John 3:16, favorite verse. Everybody laughed. He wanted to know what's a joke, but he thought something's going on behind him. So I mentioned to him, well, I did touch on that subject, and I gave this answer. Oh. He said, yes, but I'm sure you couldn't have answered this one. Here was number 2. Now everybody really laughed. And he looked around and wondered, maybe he thought he had a hole in his pants or something. He thought, what are they laughing at behind me? So then I told him, I said, you and your self-confidence think you know, so you don't bother to find out. You come to make trouble instead of listening ahead of time. It had an effect on people, because we may feel confident, but we've got to test that confidence all our lives. Try it here and there. We can't just stand firm on some thing and think, I don't ever need to hear another fact. Test it. Keep looking. Does anybody have anything better? Can he reply to you better than the last man? Keep thinking. That way you correct your course. I suppose I can come back to some of these things to try to illustrate the difficulties again. Remember that in making your position, whether you're reasoning on something or you're pointing out some facts, that people will usually try to make you say something you didn't say. If, for example, you try to be reasonable, if you use the Aryan syllogism, if you say to somebody, look, if this man was God, then he didn't die, in which case he wasn't really a man. And people will tell you, you're limiting God. That yes, it's impossible that one person can be God and man at the same time, but God can do anything, and he could make it true anyway. That's not what you're doing. You're not limiting. This is a self-defeating proposition. That is, if it's true that one individual is both God and man, it will lead you to the conclusion that it's false. It defeats itself. It has nothing to do with the limitation of ability for someone to force it to be true. Just as the assumption that God has a son will lead you to the conclusion that he doesn't have a son. It's self-defeating. This is, I say, words people try to put in your mouth to make it seem like you've said something you haven't said. Somebody told me, was it only yesterday, about a story from India about a man who was in a discussion, a debate with a missionary, a Muslim in a debate, and he put him on. I guess he fooled him. At one point, somebody came to the Muslim. He whispered something to him, and he made a sad face, and the missionary wanted to know what's wrong. He said, "The man just told me that Jibreel died." And the missionary says, "Don't be silly, an angel can't die." He says, "But you told me God died." You see, it's easy to keep saying things, but we don't think about the meaning of it. And then what he did by that tactic is he points out to a man, have you ever thought about the words you say and what they mean? You can say it so often that you forget what it is those words mean. Because what do they mean? That's what, I think I mentioned last night, Spinoza complained about 500 years ago when he left the Jewish community and the Christians came running to him and said, "Well, now you should be a Christian. You're an intelligent man." And Spinoza, all his life, he said, "If I knew what you people were talking about, I might be. You tell me God became a man. What do you mean? Do you mean like when water becomes ice? That God is one kind of a thing and then one day he squeezed himself down into a man? Is that what you mean? God became man? Do you mean he used to be God, now he's a man? Is that what you mean? What do you mean when you say that? It's words, but does it have any sense to it? What do you mean if you say Jesus died, but he's God? Do you mean it like some lizards have this ability that if a falcon will catch the lizard by the tail breaks off and the lizard runs away and the tail will sit there and twitch for a while and finally die? Is that what you mean? That God was a man and at the last moment as he was killed he got away and the body died, but he didn't really die? Is that what you mean? Because they don't. I tell you, no, that would be cheating, because he really died. He had to die. It's not like he just stepped out and left a body behind. But then they can't say what they do mean. In fact, it may sound funny, but that's exactly how some church authorities put it. They'll tell you that till now we are trying to decide who died on the cross. They don't mean they think it was the wrong man or something like the Muslims might say. They mean, who was it that died? It was Jesus, but if he was a man and he died, we can understand that, but that wouldn't be good enough. But then God doesn't die. Who was it anyway? They're still talking about it after all these centuries. Now, of course, this was what one priest stressed to me in Ireland, and it was the result, I feel anyway, of a recent document. I have a copy in here of an ecumenical group that had published a statement in the UK on the subject of mysteries of faith, saying that, yes, these things are real problems. To say God died really is trouble. But they say this is a mystery. It is a bold proclamation of a truth, which already is a contradiction in terms. Mystery, at least in English, it comes from the word mew, which is an imitation of one man whispering to another. Mew, a mystery is a thing you kept secret, not a thing you announced. But I tell you, a mystery is a truth. But the complaint is, it doesn't make any sense. And I say that's the nature of it. It's such a big truth, you can't look at it. It's like looking at the sun. You have to turn your eyes away. It'll blind you. But the fallacy in that analogy is that